The jokes began before the tank truck even stopped rolling. That was the part Clara Benton never forgot. People later told the story as if the fish were the strange part. They weren't. The strange part was how fast a room full of serious farmers decided that one woman had become a county-wide punchline. It started at the Drainage District office on a cold March morning in the Arkansas Delta. Mud was drying on boots, seed catalogs were stacked beside stale donuts. A radar map blinked on the wall, showing another spring storm crawling toward the county. Every conversation in the room came back to the same problem. The ground was tired, not dead. Nobody said dead, just tired. Water ran off too fast. Fertilizer got more expensive. Diesel got more expensive. Yields looked fine on paper until the bills arrived behind them. Then Clara lifted one hand. Across the room, Owen Pike closed his eyes like he had just heard a siren. Somebody said, "Don't do it, Clara." She looked over. "Do what?" Owen pointed at her with a foam coffee cup. "Make that face." "What face?" "The face you make right before you ruin everybody's morning." The room laughed because they knew exactly what he meant. Clara Benton did not come to county meetings for small talk. She came when a number bothered her. Or when some old piece of land had told her something and she could not let it go. The district chair sighed. "All right, what are you seeing?" Clara walked to the whiteboard. She drew a field. Then she drew a lateral ditch. Then another ditch. Then a thin blue line moving through both. Nobody interrupted yet. Then Clara drew fish in the ditch. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet before they decide whether something is funny. Owen leaned forward. "No." Clara turned. "No what?" He pointed at the board. "No fish. Fish are the point. That is exactly why I said no." By noon, half the county knew Clara Benton wanted to stock fish in her irrigation ditches. By supper, the story had improved. By the next morning, according to one version at the parts counter, she was building an aquarium under her soybean field. Clara let them laugh. Mostly because she understood why it sounded ridiculous. The Benton farm covered a little over 470 acres of low delta ground outside a two-stoplight town. Her father had grown cotton there. Her grandfather had grown soybeans and rice there. Clara grew whatever the markets and the water would allow. The farm had always been a water farm as much as a crop farm. Long, shallow ditches stitched the place together. Irrigation laterals carried water across hot fields in summer, drainage cuts pulled storm water away in spring. Every acre had an opinion about water. And Clara had spent most of her life learning to hear it. Her grandfather, Eli Benton, used to kneel in a field and crumble soil through his fingers the way other men tested tobacco. "Good dirt breaks like cake," he told her once. Clara was 13 then. She had laughed because the soil in his palm looked nothing like cake. It looked dark, soft, full of threads and specks and tiny movement. Eli had held it out to her. "Not the kind you frost," he said. "The kind that holds together until you touch it." Years later, after Eli was gone, Clara found his old field books in a metal cabinet behind the shop. Rainfall. Planting dates, worm counts. Strange notes about roots. Notes about smell. Notes about how fast water disappeared after a storm. Notes that did not look like management at first. They looked like a man paying attention. One line stayed with her. "Soil is not a bucket. Soil is a living sponge." At the time Clara inherited the place, the sponge was failing. Organic matter had slipped. The topsoil crusted faster after heavy rain. A July irrigation that should have carried the field for days seemed to vanish by the next afternoon. The farm still produced, but it produced like a tired worker taking overtime. More input, less forgiveness. Every bad season showed the weakness more clearly. Clara tried the normal repairs first. Cover crop strips, less aggressive tillage, compost where she could afford it. Different timing on fertilizer. Some worked, some did not. None moved fast enough. Then she found a research paper about integrated rice and fish systems. It was not written for the Arkansas Delta. It came from places where farmers have managed water, fish, mud, insects, and nutrients together for generations. The idea was old. Older than most of the machinery parked in Clara's shed. Fish stirred sediment. Fish grazed algae. Fish produced waste that fed microbial life. Fish turned the water channel from a pipe into a biological corridor. Clara read the paper twice, then again with Eli's notebooks open beside her. After that, the idea stopped feeling like a novelty. It started feeling like a question. If the farm already moved water through miles of shallow ditches, why was she treating that water like it had only one job? That question became the whiteboard drawing, and the whiteboard drawing became a joke that followed her everywhere. At the diner, Owen raised his coffee when she walked in. "Morning, Captain Benton." At the fuel station, somebody asked whether she needed worms or tartar sauce. At church, a woman she barely knew said she had heard Clara was going into seafood. Clara smiled through most of it. Then April came, and she ordered fish. Not enough to change the whole farm, just enough to make the county nervous. A hatchery truck backed into her yard, with aerated tanks sloshing behind the cab. It carried blue tilapia fingerlings and a small number of forage minnows for a test section of the irrigation network. Clara had selected a contained ditch system with screens at the outlets, warm shallow water, and easy monitoring. She had permits, notebooks, temperature logs, and more caution than the jokes gave her credit for. The jokes did not care. Trucks started appearing along the road before the hatchery driver finished unrolling the first hose. Owen arrived last, which somehow made him look more dramatic. He stepped out, stared at the tanks, stared at the ditch, then stared at Clara. "No." Clara put on her gloves. "Good morning to you too. Tell me those are not fish." "They are fish." "Tell me they are not going in that ditch." "They are going in that ditch." Owen looked at the water as if it had betrayed him. "This is a row crop farm." "Correct." "You are putting fish in it." "Also correct." He stood there for a long moment. Then he said, "Eli would have laughed." Clara smiled. Eli would have taken notes. That was the first line nobody laughed at. Only for a second. Then the fish went in, the water flashed silver, and the road crowd got the show it came for. For a few weeks, nothing happened. That may have been the most disappointing outcome for the people watching. No disaster, no smell, no ditch full of dead fish, no perfect proof either. Just water, mud, plants, and fingerlings slipping through the channels like small pieces of weather. Clara checked oxygen in the mornings. She checked screens after storms. She measured water temperature in the heat of the afternoon. She kept records that would have bored every person who had come to laugh. By June, the first strange thing showed up. The ditches looked cleaner. Not clean like a swimming pool. Farm ditches are not supposed to look pretty. But the surface mats of algae thinned. The water moved easier. Sediment did not pile up as quickly in the bends. Her hired hand, Mason, noticed it before he wanted to admit it. He stood at the edge of the test ditch one evening, squinting down at the moving water. "Did you spray this stretch?" "No." "Did you drag it?" "No." "Then why is it not ugly?" Clara looked at the fish nosing through the shallow current. "Maybe it is being worked from underneath." Mason took one step back. "I hate that answer." So did half the county when they heard it. But by late summer, the field beside the test ditch looked different, not miracle different. Agriculture rarely gives miracles. It gives margins. The leaves held color longer after heat spikes, the ground near the ditch stayed friable after irrigation. When Clara pushed a soil probe into the edge rows, it slid easier than it should have. A crop consultant named Renee Alvarez came out in August and walked the test block without being told the theory. She stopped at the 8th row, bent down, and broke a clod apart with her thumb. Then she looked toward the ditch. "What did you change here?" Clara kept her face still. "Why?" Renee rubbed soil between her fingers. "This edge has more structure. More biological smell, and before you say I'm imagining it, I know what dead dirt smells like." Clara felt something inside her tighten. Not triumph. Caution. Because one observation is not proof. One good edge row is not a system. One season is not a victory. That was the part people did not see. The laughter was easy to notice, the waiting was harder. The next year, Clara expanded the test. More ditches, more screens. More sampling. She took water readings, soil cores, infiltration tests, earthworm counts, yield maps, and tissue samples. She compared ditch-adjacent rows against interior rows. She paid for lab tests she could barely justify. If she was going to be wrong, she wanted to be wrong in writing. By July, the numbers stopped being polite. The highest vigor zones began tracing the irrigation laterals like a green shadow. The difference was not perfectly even. It never is. Field history, slope, compaction, and drainage still mattered, but the pattern kept returning. Where the living water moved, the soil improved first. At harvest, the monitors made the pattern harder to dismiss. The canal edge sections averaged nearly 12% stronger in the best test blocks. Moisture held longer after irrigation, nitrogen use looked more efficient. Algae maintenance costs dropped. The ditch cleaning bill was smaller. Clara printed the maps and taped them above the workbench. She did not tell Owen, she did not have to. Farm numbers travel faster than gossip because farmers trust them more. 3 days after harvest, Owen walked into the equipment shed carrying a folded copy of her yield summary. Clara found him standing under the fluorescent light, staring at the paper like it had insulted his family. He did not look up. No. Clara leaned against the doorway. "You keep using that word." He raised the paper. "Fish. Yes. In a ditch. Yes. In your actual production fields. That was the idea." Owen folded the paper again, slowly. "I was happier when this was stupid. The breakthrough came in the 3rd summer. Not because the farm looked perfect, because the county looked terrible. Rain stopped in the last week of May. By mid-June, the wind carried dust off fields that should have been holding green. Irrigation pumps ran until they sounded tired, corn leaves rolled tight by noon. Soybeans silvered under the heat. The Benton farm suffered too. Clara never pretended otherwise, but the test fields suffered differently. They held on longer between waterings. The edge rows recovered faster after heat. Soil cores from the ditch zones stayed darker, looser, and cooler. In one infiltration test after a brief storm, water entered those soils almost twice as fast as the compacted interior strip she used for comparison. That was the number Renee underlined 3 times. Not the fish count. Not the novelty. The water entering the ground. Because that was the hidden mechanism the county had missed. The fish were not magic, they were workers inside a system people had mistaken for plumbing. They grazed the algae that had been choking slow water, they stirred the bottom lightly enough to keep the ditch alive without tearing it apart. Their waste fed bacteria and fungi. The moving water carried tiny biological benefits into soil margins that had been starved of life. The farm had not added fish to crops. It had added life to the root water already traveled. Late that August, Owen drove to Clara's place without calling. He found her beside the main lateral just before sunset. The light sat low on the water. Fish moved under the surface, visible only when they turned. Owen stood next to her for almost a minute. Then he said, "This should not be working." Clara kept watching the ditch. "It is not supposed to work according to what? According to common sense." She looked at him. "Owen, common sense told us the ditch was just a ditch." He did not answer. Across the road, a neighbor's soybean field looked pale and brittle. Clara's test field was stressed, but still carrying color. Owen kicked the bank with his boot. "I made a lot of jokes." "You did. I had some excellent ones. You repeated most of them." He nodded, still staring at the water. "I am going to need you not to enjoy this." Clara laughed then, but softly, because by then the story was bigger than Owen being wrong. Researchers came the fourth year. First a county extension specialist, then 2 soil scientists from the university, then a water quality group that cared less about Clara's yields and more about what cleaner ditch flow could mean downstream. They brought sample bottles, probes, coolers, notebooks, and the careful skepticism Clara respected. One professor spent a full afternoon comparing water above and below the stocked laterals. Another mapped microbial activity near the ditch margins. Renee helped assemble 3 years of field records into something that looked dangerously close to evidence. Nobody called it a miracle. Clara liked that. Miracle was the wrong word. A miracle lets people stay passive. This was a mechanism. By the end of the 4th season, the pattern was plain enough to change behavior. Several farmers who had laughed at the first stocking began asking questions in private. What kind of screens? How warm did the water need to be? How did she keep fish from escaping? What did she do after harvest? Did the cost pencil out, really? The first neighbor to copy her did it so quietly that he probably thought nobody noticed. Unfortunately for him, a hatchery truck is difficult to hide on a gravel road. Clara was driving back from the co-op when she saw it parked by Owen Pike's north field. She slowed. Then stopped. Owen was standing beside a ditch while a young hatchery worker adjusted a hose. Clara got out of her truck and walked to the fence. For once, she did not say anything. Owen saw her anyway. "Keep driving." Clara folded her arms. He pointed down the road. "Keep driving." She looked at the hose, then the ditch, then him. "Those appear to be fish. They are aquatic consultants." Clara's smile widened. "In a ditch." Owen stared at her. "I will deny this conversation happened." By the 5th year, the Benton farm no longer looked transformed in a way strangers could understand from the road. That mattered. The proof was not cinematic. It was practical. Organic matter edged upward in the test zones. Earthworms returned in numbers Clara had not seen since childhood. The soil held water longer and took water faster. Ditch maintenance became less of a war. Fertilizer timing got easier. The farm still had bad days, bad prices, bad forecasts, and machinery that broke at the worst possible moment. But it also had more resilience. That was the word the researchers used, resilience. Eli Benton would have called it forgiveness. One evening, Clara stood by the first stocked lateral with her daughter, Nora. The water moved quietly between the banks. Fish flashed beneath a skin of reflected sky. Beyond the ditch, the field held the last orange of the day. Nora had heard the story so many times she could tell it herself. She knew about the whiteboard. She knew about Owen's jokes. She knew about the hatchery truck and the yield maps and the drought. Year that changed everyone's tone. After a while, Nora said, "People always talk about the fish." Clara nodded. "They do." Nora looked at the darkening field. "But it was never really about the fish, was it?" Clara smiled because that was exactly what the county had taken 5 years to understand. The fish were just the part that moved. The real story was what had been waiting underneath. A farm everybody thought was worn out had not needed a miracle, it had needed someone to remember that soil is alive. And then give the water a reason to carry life back.